Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, well, one of the most foundational yet sometimes quite slippery concepts in organizational studies: technology.
Absolutely.
When most people hear that word, they immediately think of the latest algorithms or, fancy hardware. But for those of us engaged in advanced organizational theory, the definition is, well, far richer, isn't it? It reaches right into issues of structure, power, and ultimately human entanglement.
Indeed. And our mission today really is to take you on a deep, high-level academic journey. We're aiming to synthesize decades of quite complex frameworks.
There are really big names in there.
Oh, yes. From the empirical manufacturing studies of someone like Joan Woodward, right through to the, shall we say, more radical philosophical critiques of someone like Donna Haraway and her ideas on cyborganization. So the aim is to provide a complete, perhaps more nuanced understanding of how this term technology has been defined and then redefined across the modern, symbolic, and postmodern perspectives. We want to extract those core variables, things like technical complexity, task variability, interdependence, because these really do underpin successful organizational design.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the origin then, because I think the intellectual journey of the term itself is absolutely crucial here. We really have to start with the Greek root, techne.
Yes. Yeah.
Originally, techne didn't refer to a machine or a tool, did it? It actually referred to the skill of the artist, the mastery of craft, or maybe the knowledge of how to create something beautiful or useful.
Precisely. And tracing that evolution, it really reveals the core argument of our deep dive today. That early association with artistry, with skill, it became successively obscured over time.
How so?
Well, it was certainly shaped by medieval artisans and pre-industrial craft workers who still had that sense of embodied skill. But the dramatic shift, the real change, occurred with the Industrial Revolution and its production engineers.
The engineers.
The tendency then became to objectify technology, to equate it solely with tangible physical tools, equipment, machines, and importantly, fixed, rational procedures. Technology became something external to the worker, you see, rather than the knowledge within the worker.
So if a classical modernist theorist talks about technology, they're often talking about the measurable physical apparatus, the machine itself.
Generally, yes. That's the starting point.
But our sources note a really fascinating counter-trend, a sort of post-industrial return to artistry, perhaps, re-invoking that link to power, knowledge, or craftsmanship.
Yes, that pendulum swing is a powerful illustration, isn't it? There's a fantastic example given, the concept Nissan deployed, shift thinking.
Oh, yes, I remember reading about that.
They intentionally moved beyond just treating their manufacturing technology as a sterile production tool. The goal was actually to infuse the spirit and philosophy of their brand, a kind of modern artistry, if you like, into every single step of the production process and the resulting product design.
So connecting the engineering back to the brand identity.
Exactly. It's a deliberate attempt to reconnect that sophisticated engineering technique with a symbolic identity, ensuring the technology serves a holistic brand vision, not just, minimum efficiency targets. It brings back that element of craft and purpose.
That sets the stage perfectly then. For the classical approach, we must first get to grips with the modernist perspective, which really begins with that objectified, tangible technical system.
Right. So from the modernist perspective, the definition is quite crisp and functional. Technology is defined simply as the means an organization uses to transform resource inputs into products or services.
Okay, the classic input transformation output model.
Precisely. It's a classic open systems model where technology is the engine, the core process, that converts inputs, raw materials, knowledge, people, whatever it might be, into outputs like finished goods, educated students, or healed patients.
And this technology choice, it intimately links the organization to its environment, doesn't it? Because the environment provides the inputs and consumes the output.
Absolutely crucial link. The environment supplies the inputs, consumes the outputs, and that guarantees the flow continues. The technology is the bridge.
And crucially, for any kind of advanced analysis, we first have to define the analytical level we're observing. Otherwise, the concept just becomes too broad, doesn't it?
Completely. It's meaningless without specifying the level. Our sources identify 3 key levels that really demand separate analysis.
Okay, let's break those down.
So at the highest level, you have the organizational level. This focuses on the core technology.
The main thing the organization does.
Essentially, yes. It's the primary process that ensures the uninterrupted flow of resources necessary to sustain the entire entity. Think of the knowledge production system at a research university, perhaps, or the sequential flow on the assembly line of a car company. That's the core.
And what about conglomerates? Big companies with lots of different businesses.
That's a critical point. It's essential here that if you're analyzing a highly diversified conglomerate, say a massive holding company with unrelated businesses, maybe a finance firm that also owns a shipping line, you absolutely must analyze the core technology of each business unit separately. You can't analyze the conglomerate as a whole in terms of a single core technology. It just doesn't work.
Right, makes sense. So below the organizational level.
Below that, we find the supporting levels. Next is the unit level. This includes technologies that facilitate but don't actually constitute the core mission.
So things like HR or accounting.
Exactly. This is where you find the purchasing department, accounting, human resources, sales departments. These units use technologies which are distinct from, say, the main chemical processing plant, but their efficiency is absolutely vital for that core flow to continue smoothly.
And the most detailed level.
And finally, the most granular level, the task level. This breaks down into the specific, really fine-grained procedures within those units. We're talking about the techniques of classroom engagement used by a particular professor, or the specific data collection methods used in a research lab, or even the standardized flowchart for budget planning used by the accounting unit.
Okay, so analyzing all three levels, organizational, unit, task, allows us to apply the subsequent typologies with, well, surgical precision, as you said.
That's the idea. It gives you a much richer picture.
Now, early organization theorists, who were often, let's face it, obsessed with applying these models mainly for manufacturing, immediately ran into a bit of trouble when they tried to shift their focus off the factory floor and into the service sector.
Yes, the service sector posed a challenge.
This led to the creation of what seems like quite a rigid distinction between service and manufacturing technologies. The sources identify three characteristics often seen as unique to services. They are, 1, consumed at the time of production.
Simultaneous production and consumption.
2, they're intangible.
You can't touch them.
And 3, they cannot be stored in inventory.
Right. No warehousing of services.
The quintessential manufacturing example is obviously a car. It's tangible. You can store it, consume it later.
Definitely.
Conversely, think of, say, a highly personalized legal consultation. The advice itself is intangible, you can't store it, and the consumption happens the moment the lawyer communicates the strategy.
A very clear contrast on the surface.
However, the sources do warn against relying too heavily on this distinction, don't they? Beyond that superficial categorization, the boundary is actually increasingly difficult to maintain in a detailed analysis.
Absolutely. We have to be really wary of these neat categorizations. Most modern outputs are actually combinations, aren't they?
Give us an example.
Well, if you buy a new computer, you're clearly buying a manufactured good. But the operating system updates, the technical support line you might call, the warranty that comes with it, those are all services, and they're inextricably linked to that physical good.
That's a great point.
Furthermore, think about banks. They operate purely with mediating service technologies, connecting people, facilitating transactions, yet they frequently refer to the services they offer as products. They adopt the marketing language, the packaging concerns of manufactured goods.
And manufacturers are doing the reverse.
Precisely. Manufacturing firms, meanwhile, are now obsessed with the entire service ecosystem around their physical output, the customer experience, the rapid supply chain response, the customization options. It's all about the service wrap.
So this cross-fertilization, it really demonstrates that we can't just rely on categorizing the output, can we? We have to pivot to looking at the process variables.
Exactly. Which brings us very neatly to the foundational typologies of the modernists.
Okay, so since we can't simply rely on whether a product is tangible or not, we need to dive into the core variables that define the process of the work itself. And this brings us directly to the foundational work of those early modernists, Woodward, Thomson, and Perot.
Three giants of the field.
Their work really established technology as that critical contingency variable, didn't it? Demonstrating that organizational performance and structure depend fundamentally on the technology being utilized.
Absolutely fundamental shift in thinking.
Let's start with Joan Woodward. Her research, beginning back in the 1950s, it's just a classic example of empirical rigor overturning theoretical expectation.
It really is. She began, as many did then, trying to find the best classical organizational structure, that sort of one-size-fits-all model. She surveyed over 100 UK manufacturing organizations.
A significant study for its time.
Oh, huge. And she found absolutely no correlation between the classical structural variables, things like span of control or the number of hierarchy levels, and the economic performance of the firms. None at all.
Which must have been quite baffling initially.
You can imagine. But her genius moment, the real breakthrough, came when she grouped the companies differently. Not by industry, because, say, a chemical factory could run batch or a continuous process, but by technical complexity.
And how did she define that?
She defined it as the degree of mechanization in the core manufacturing process. And suddenly, this revealed the pattern she'd been looking for. The best, or perhaps the most effective, structure was actually contingent upon the core technology employed.
Fascinating. So what were the main groups in her typology?
Her typology established three main groups, ordered by this idea of technical complexity. First, you have unit or small batch production. This is the lowest complexity.
Like custom work.
Exactly. It involves custom work, producing items one at a time or in very small quantities, think custom shipbuilding, high-end Savile Row tailoring, or specialized engineering prototypes. Since each item is unique, the work is highly non-routine.
And the structure needed.
The successful structure, she found, must be organic. That means smaller spans of control, fewer rigid rules, decentralized decision-making, and crucially, workers typically understand and participate in the entire process, not just one tiny bit.
Okay, so that's the low end. What's next?
Second, we have large batch or mass production, moderate complexity. This is your classic assembly line, think Fordism. Highly routinized procedures, standardized output, repetitive tasks.
And the structure here? Predictably different.
Predictably different. Success here demands a highly mechanistic form, centralized decision-making, rigid rules and procedures, large spans of control. It's all optimized for efficiency and predictability.
Makes sense. And the third type?
Third is continuous processing. This is the highest level of technical complexity. It involves continuous, non-discrete flow transformations. Think of highly automated chemical plants, oil refineries, or perhaps automated waste treatment centers. The core work is actually managed by sophisticated process control systems, often with relatively few workers directly involved in the transformation itself.
Okay, so high automation. What structure works best here? Does it become even more mechanistic?
This is the fascinating part. Crucially, the successful structure here actually reverts back to organic. Decentralized decision-making and small spans of control are needed again, but with a major difference from the small batch end.
Right. This is the critical insight, isn't it? The famous inverted U-curve. You have small batch needing organic, mass production needing mechanistic in the middle, and then continuous processing, the most complex, reverting back to organic. Why? Why the return to flexibility at the high complexity end?
Well, the return to an organic structure and continuous processing is essential because the work, while it might appear highly mechanized and automated, is also highly non-routine again, but in a very different sense than in small batch production.
How so?
In mass production, if the assembly line stops, it's usually pretty obvious what failed a specific machine, a supply issue. In continuous processing, the complexity of the integrated system is so extreme that a failure might be subtle, unique, maybe a novel interaction between different parts of the system. It's often highly stochastic, unpredictable.
So you need experts on hand to figure it out quickly.
Precisely. You need decentralized teams of highly specialized process engineers and maintenance experts who can diagnose and react to these unique, often complex system fluctuations. The organization requires more management levels here, not necessarily for traditional top-down control, but for intense specialization and expertise needed close to the process.
So more managers, but not more hierarchy in the traditional sense.
Exactly. The increased number of management levels are necessary because you need these specialized departments dedicated to things like preventative maintenance, real-time process control monitoring, and troubleshooting unique system interactions that might cascade rapidly. Decision-making must be delegated, decentralized, to these experts on the ground. A process engineer dealing with a critical system fluctuation simply cannot wait for centralized approval from someone miles away who doesn't understand the specifics.
Because the technical complexity demands it.
It demands constant flexibility and rapid expert adaptation. Hence, the organic structure works best again. The U-curve beautifully shows that performance really depends on matching the level of technical complexity with the appropriate degree of structural flexibility or control.
Okay, so Woodward gives us technical complexity. Then James D. Thomson provided a really critical expansion, didn't he? He sought to apply the concept of technology beyond just manufacturing, focusing instead on how different transformation processes create different levels of task interdependence.
Yes, shifting the focus to interdependence was key.
Which in turn dictates the required coordination mechanism. He really broadened the typology quite significantly.
He did. Thomson identified 3 core technology types, moving essentially from the lowest to the highest level of interdependence between tasks or units. First, he identified mediating technology.
What does that involve?
This technology connects clients or users who are or wish to be interdependent. Think of banks linking borrowers and savers, or maybe large-scale real estate agencies connecting buyers and sellers, or even something like eBay. The key point is that the units serving different client pairs often work independently.
So the interdependence is low.
Relatively low. He called this pooled task interdependence. The organization's total output is simply the sum, or the pool, of its independent unit outputs. Coordination is therefore quite simple. It relies primarily on rules and standard procedures to ensure consistency across those separate operations. You want the loan process to be roughly the same, whichever branch you go to.
Okay, that's mediating. What's next?
Second is long-linked technology. Now, this covers those sequential linear transformation processes we saw in Woodward's mass production and continuous processing categories. Think of an assembly line again.
So A feeds B, B feeds C.
Exactly. This creates sequential task interdependence. Unit A must complete its task before Unit B can begin, B must finish before C, and so on in a one-directional flow. Coordination here is naturally more demanding than with pooled interdependence. It requires planning and scheduling in addition to the basic rules and procedures, because a failure or delay in Unit A immediately halts the output of Units B and C downstream.
Right, you need to manage that flow carefully. And the third type.
The third and most complex in terms of interdependence is intensive technology. This is found in organizations or units where achieving a desired outcome requires coordinating a wide variety of specialized abilities or services, often in response to a unique input, to produce a customized output. Think of a general hospital emergency room dealing with a unique trauma case, or specialized project organizations like a construction crew building a unique house, or perhaps creative teams in an advertising agency developing a bespoke campaign.
Okay, so lots of back and forth needed.
Absolutely. This generates the highest level of interdependence, reciprocal task interdependence. There's mutual dependence and a reciprocal back and forth flow of work and information between specialists or units. Think of the constant communication between surgeons, anesthetists, and nurses during a complex operation.
So coordination must be really sophisticated here.
Extremely. Coordination demands not just rules and scheduling, but PLUS mutual adjustment. This requires constant communication, feedback loops, often co-location of teams, and it frequently manifests as complex teamwork and unscheduled meetings to handle unpredictable interdependencies as they arise.
Now, it's fascinating that Thomson, who is very much a modernist obsessed with rational efficiency, apparently had a kind of missing quadrant in his theoretical matrix, the one representing standardized inputs and outputs, but with unstandardized transformation processes.
Yes, that's a really telling omission, isn't it? From a purely rationalist perspective, that quadrant seems highly inefficient, perhaps even nonsensical. Why would you strive for a standard product or outcome while allowing the process to be unpredictable and variable every single time you do it?
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, or at least high cost.
It signifies enormous inefficiency. Now, while examples might exist, perhaps brainstorming creative solutions to a known standard problem could fit Thomson's strong adherence to the norms of rational efficiency meant he effectively ignored the seemingly inefficient zone. Which, interestingly, opened the door for Charles Perrow to come along and analyze technology not just as a whole system, but right down at the task level, considering exactly that kind of variability.
All right, so Perrow provided the scalpel, didn't he? Yeah. Moving the focus entirely down to the task level of analysis. His great contribution was defining technologies based on 2 specific dimensions that allow us to differentiate technological use within single organizations, often within different departments, regardless of the core product or the overall interdependence type.
Exactly. He drilled down. His 2 crucial variables are, first, task variability. This is essentially the number of unexpected events or exceptions encountered in the work process. Are there few surprises or many?
Okay, how often do things deviate from the norm?
Precisely. And the second variable is task analyzability. This is the extent to which known standardized methods or procedures exist for dealing with those exceptions when they do occur. Can the problem be solved through logical analytical search, or does it require intuition, guesswork, or experience?
So is there a known way to fix it when it goes wrong?
That's the nub of it. By arranging these two dimensions, variability and analyzability, in a simple 2x2 matrix, he gave us 4 powerful technology types that can describe individual tasks or unit-level work.
Let's go through them.
Okay. First, where variability is low and analyzability is high, we have routine technology. Few exceptions, and when they do occur, the solution is known and probably documented. Think of highly standardized clerical work or simple assembly tasks.
Makes sense. Low variability, low analyzability.
That gives us craft technology. Exceptions are rare here too, but crucially, solving them when they occur requires significant invention, intuition, perhaps artistry, or highly specialized, often tacit experience, precisely because no known analytical method exists. Think of traditional construction work dealing with unforeseen ground conditions, or maybe some forms of specialized artistic creation.
Okay. How about high variability?
If variability is high, but analyzability is also high, we get engineering technology. Many exceptions are encountered, lots of problems pop up, but the worker possesses the specialized analytical knowledge, training, or diagnostic procedures needed to solve them relatively systematically. Think of specialized accountants dealing with complex tax codes or advanced technical repair specialists diagnosing intricate machine faults.
Right, lots of problems, but we have the tools or knowledge to figure them out.
Yes. And finally, the most challenging quadrant. High variability combined with low analyzability gives us non-routine technology. Here you face constant uncertainty. Problems are frequent, varied, and novel, and there's often a complete lack of known, documented methods for resolution. You're really operating in the dark.
Where will we find this?
Classic examples are pure research and development labs working on cutting-edge problems, strategic planning dealing with highly uncertain futures, or perhaps deep theoretical science pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
Now, this is where, as the source material says, it gets really interesting, because true insight, it seems, demands applying all 3 of these typologies, Woodward's, Thompson's, and Perot's, simultaneously, acknowledging the organizational, unit, and task levels.
Absolutely. They're not competing theories, they're complementary lenses.
Let's use the bus manufacturing example from the text to illustrate why this multi-level approach is so necessary.
Okay, a bus manufacturer provides a perfect test case for this integration. At the organizational level, looking at the whole company, the core technology might well be long-linked using Thompson's framework, because the chassis construction, body mounting, engine installation, these things have to happen sequentially.
Right, classic sequential flow.
However, since almost every bus is custom ordered with unique specifications, different seating layouts, different heating systems, maybe specialized doors for accessibility, the firm might also operate fundamentally as a small batch technology using Woodward's framework at its core level, because each output is essentially unique.
So long-linked and small batch at the organizational level.
Yeah.
Interesting. But the internal unit analysis changes the picture entirely, doesn't it?
Precisely. If we then drill down using Perot and look at the unit level, say the department responsible for building the main bus chassis, perhaps they only deal with 2 or 3 standardized chassis lengths based on the order. In that specific unit, the work could be classified as routine technology according to Perot. Variability is low, only a few chassis types, and analyzability is high, standardized construction methods.
Okay. But what about fitting out the interior?
Now contrast that chassis unit with the internal trim department. They have to deal with an enormous variety of customized seating materials, different handrail systems, specialized luggage racks, unique electronic displays, accessibility equipment, and so on, based on each specific customer order. That department is best described using Perot as employing engineering technology. Task variability is extremely high because every bus interior is different, but the workers are skilled technicians who possess the specialized knowledge and techniques to analyze and resolve those variations relatively quickly and efficiently, keeping the task analyzability high.
So within the same small batch organization, you have routine units and engineering units operating side by side.
Exactly. This integrated approach, linking Woodward's technical complexity, Thompson's interdependence, and Perot's task characteristics across different levels, is really how we maximize our insight into organizational design and why certain structures work better for certain parts of the same organization. You need all 3 lenses.
We absolutely must pivot now, though. We need to move past the modernist tendency to objectify technology as just a sterile object or a set of procedures. We arrive at the symbolic perspective.
A crucial shift in focus.
Here, technology is seen not just as hardware or process, but as something that is socially constructed. The focus shifts to interaction, interpretation, and the symbolic meaning that people attach to technology. It's seen as both an outcome of social processes and an ongoing process of learning and negotiation itself. Hashtag tag 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 A. The symbolic view in new technologies?
Yes, and this symbolic turn gained massive traction, really took off, with the advent of computer-based technologies, microelectronics, robotics, network data processing, and so on. Carl Weick, a hugely influential figure here, observed that these new technologies were qualitatively different from older forms like assembly lines.
Why different?
Primarily because they often require operators to manipulate symbolic representations, data on screens, abstract models, rather than tangible physical objects. This pushes human interpretation and sense-making absolutely to the forefront. You're not just turning a wrench, you're interpreting a complex data display.
And Weick identified some specific characteristics of these new technologies that really compound the complexity, taking it far beyond anything that earlier modernist theorists had to consider.
He did. He pointed out three key characteristics. First, he argued these new technologies are often stochastic.
Meaning unpredictable.
Essentially, yes. It means unexpected interruptions occur frequently, often without obvious cause. Critically, Weick argued these failures are often the unique product of dense interactions between hundreds or thousands of components, subtle software bugs interacting, network latency issues, unexpected sensor input variations. This leads to failures that can be one-off, novel events.
So you can't easily learn from them.
That's the problem. The underlying complex causes are often impossible for operators to truly understand or replicate. You can fix the immediate symptom, perhaps reboot the system, but the system doesn't necessarily teach you how to prevent the next unique error arising from a different complex interaction. Genuine learning from failure becomes much harder.
Okay, stochastic. What else?
Second, they are often continuous. They're designed to operate non-stop, 24/7. Think of core banking systems, national power grids, or global data networks. The organization must therefore perform hardware upgrades, software patches, system revisions, and other changes while the system is running.
No scheduled downtime for maintenance.
Often very little, or none for the core functions. There's no luxury of stopping the line for a complete overhaul. This pushes the operational complexity to an extreme level because you're constantly integrating new elements into a live, dynamic, and already complex ecosystem. The risk of introducing new errors during updates is significant.
And the third characteristic?
And third, they are fundamentally abstract. The core working processes, what's actually happening inside the microchips or the network routers, are completely hidden from the operators. They are inside the machine's black box. Operators rely entirely on symbolic representations provided by the interface, numeric readouts, graphical displays, warning lights, color codes.
Which might not perfectly represent reality.
Exactly. These representations are often twice removed from the underlying physical or electronic reality they're supposed to represent. This potential disconnect between the symbolic interface and the material world it depicts can lead to significant operator error, misinterpretation, and even conflicting interpretations among different members of the human team looking at the same data.
So the combined implication of these three qualities, stochastic, continuous, abstract, is pretty profound, isn't it?
It really is. It means that reliability ceases to be just an engineering goal you designed for initially. It becomes a fundamental, ongoing, existential, organizational issue. Especially in high-risk environments like nuclear power plants, complex chemical processing, or air traffic control systems.
Yeah.
Managing reliability requires constant vigilance, sophisticated teamwork, and deep understanding of the potential for unexpected, complex failures. Hashtag B, normal accidents, and the ASCADA framework.
This issue of potential catastrophic unreliability brings us directly to Charles Perrow's later work, particularly his theory of normal accidents, which famously explored technological failures like the 3 Mile Island nuclear incident. His conclusion was quite stark, wasn't it? That some catastrophic failures are not just possible, but perhaps inevitable features of certain kinds of complex, tightly coupled systems.
Yes, a very sobering conclusion. Perrow located the source of this inherent unpredictability in the interaction of two specific factors often found together in the design of high-risk systems. First, high system complexity. This complexity, he argued, guarantees that there will be unexpected, unforeseen, and often invisible interactions between different components or subsystems. Things will fail in ways the designers never anticipated.
Okay, complexity breeds unexpected interactions. What's the second factor?
The second factor is tight coupling. This means that components or processes within the system are highly interlinked and respond very quickly to each other, with little slack or buffer time or resources between steps. When an unexpected failure occurs due to complexity, the tight coupling means that human reactions or even automated system reactions to that initial unexpected event can escalate the failure incredibly rapidly through the system.
So there's no time to stop it.
Essentially, yes. There is simply no time or buffer space to intervene effectively, diagnose the novel problem, and take corrective action before the failure cascades. He concluded that intervention is often functionally impossible due to the sheer speed and unpredictability created by this toxic combination of complexity and coupling. Such catastrophic failures, though hopefully rare, are therefore normal in the sense that they are normal structural properties of the system itself, not just random operator errors.
Very challenging idea. Now, moving from the idea of inherent mechanical failure to how technology is shaped socially, the social construction of technology, SCO framework, provides a crucial counterpoint to any kind of simple technological determinism.
Absolutely. Seed fundamentally argues that technology is not just a pure, inevitable application of scientific laws finding its one best form. Instead, it's inherently shaped by social, cultural, and economic factors, specifically by the interpretations and negotiations among what they call relevant social groups.
And the famous example often used to illustrate this is the evolution of the bicycle by Biker and Pinch.
Yes, a classic Scott study. They showed how the early iterations of the bicycle involved huge variation. You had the high-wheeled penny farthing, various tricycle designs, the safety bicycle with two wheels the same size. The technology that was ultimately selected and stabilized wasn't necessarily the most technically optimal in some abstract sense.
It was driven by social factors.
Largely, yes. It was driven by the needs and preferences of different social groups. For instance, the perceived danger of the penny farthing led some groups to favor stability. Crucially, the need for women cyclists to be able to ride while wearing the long dresses common at the time was a major factor favoring the development and adoption of the low step-through frame of the safety bicycle. The technology that won out was the result of social negotiation, interpretation of problems, danger, and trade-offs between different desired features like speed, stability, and ease of use for different groups.
So technology shapes society, but society shapes technology right back.
Precisely. It's a recursive loop. And this loop technology shaping and being shaped by culture and practice is beautifully captured in Julian Orr's ethnographic study of Xerox photocopier repair technicians.
Ah, yes. Talking about machines.
Yeah.
Fascinating read.
Isn't it? Orr found that these seemingly mundane copy machines possess both a clear technical presence, the built-in mechanical demands, the error codes, the fact that this component needs replacing, but also a profound social presence. Each machine had its own unique noises, its own quirks, its individual history of prior breakdowns and repairs, which both the technicians and the regular users knew intimately.
So the machine becomes almost like a character in the office.
In a way, yes. Technicians and customers constantly negotiate the meaning of technical problems. Is that strange noise just a simple paper jam? Or is it a sign of a deeper, more serious mechanical failure requiring specialized expertise and parts? Or showed that managing technology in practice is fundamentally about managing these interpretations, these shared stories about the machines. And crucially, he highlighted how the technicians formed this informal community of practice where they shared diagnostic tips, war stories, and troubleshooting knowledge spontaneously, often bypassing the formal manuals entirely. This social learning was key to keeping the technology running.
Okay, our journey now takes a distinctively critical turn as we enter the postmodern perspective. This really forces us to consider the potentially abusive or controlling aspects of technology.
Yes, the focus shifts significantly here towards power and critique.
This line of thought often traces its concerns back to the philosopher Martin Heidegger, who famously warned that technology, by its very nature, compels us to frame the entire world, including ourselves, primarily in terms of resources to be ordered, optimized, and made ready for use. He called this enframing.
A very profound and influential warning.
And he worried that this way of thinking could ultimately imprison us in a kind of rational technological cage, echoing Max Weber's earlier critique of the iron cage of bureaucracy.
Exactly. Heidegger's warning was deep. The real essence or danger of technology lies not just in the machines themselves, but in how we allow its underlying logic, efficiency, calculability, control to shape our very being, our thoughts, our values, our relationships with nature and each other. Postmodern critics really seized on this, analyzing technologies as pervasive, often subtle tools of managerial control, capable of shaping behavior and imposing values, sometimes without us even realizing it.
Let's elaborate a bit on these technologies of control and representation. How do managers use technology for control, according to this perspective?
Well, in quite direct ways, managers can solidify their control by embedding specific behavioral demands directly into the technical systems they choose to adopt or design. The technology itself then disciplines the worker.
How so?
It forces them to conform to its prescribed physical rhythms, like the relentless speed of an assembly line, or often its cognitive demands, such as the mandatory fields that must be filled in a data entry system, or the specific sequence of steps enforced by software. The system dictates the acceptable way to work.
So beyond that overt discipline, there's also a concern about technology seducing us, perhaps.
Yes, that's another major theme. Postmodernists often worry about technology trapping us in a world of illusion, particularly through media and internet images that constantly sell us idealized, consumable lifestyles. Think Baudrillard's ideas of hyperreality or films like The Matrix. There's a concern about a potential disconnect from authentic experience, replaced by technologically mediated simulation.
But the philosophical core here, especially in the organizational context, seems to lie with Jean-François Lyotard's critique, doesn't it?
Very much so. Lyotard argued quite powerfully that post-industrial capitalism, heavily reliant on technology and information, triggers a fundamental shift in social values. We move away from grounding legitimacy in grand narratives about abstract principles like truth or justice, and towards grounding it in concrete, measurable metrics of efficiency and performativity. Does it work? Is it fast? Is it profitable?
Efficiency becomes the ultimate benchmark, the primary metric for judging power and values.
Precisely. And this often neglects or sidelines other important values like integrity, fairness, quality, or well-being, simply because they are much more difficult to quantify and measure within these technologically driven systems of evaluation.
This is exactly where Coombs, Knights, and Wilmot brought the critique directly to the use of information technology, IT, in management, didn't they?
They did. They argued very persuasively that IT often acts as a technology of managerial control, precisely because it imposes certain values through its very system of representation, how it chooses to measure and display information.
What's fascinating here is how the apparently objective appearance of performance data, for instance, measuring the number of patients served per shift in a hospital, or the average call handling time in a call center, subtly but powerfully reinforces a dominant value for speed and throughput.
Yes. Quantity over quality often wins out because quantity is easier to measure and display objectively by the IT system. This focus can come often to the detriment of, say, the quality of patient care or the depth of analysis provided in a consultation. Managers gain power by controlling which information categories are tracked and reported, reinforcing the institutional myth that equates efficiency with effectiveness. It's a subtle yet potentially coercive imposition of a managerial ideology, all presented through the apparently neutral interface of the technology.
Of course, the sources also note that employees nearly always find ways to resist this kind of quantification, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Resistance takes many forms, from outright sabotage or working to rule, to perhaps more subtly entering false or misleading data to meet targets, or developing a rich subculture of humor and joking as a kind of psychological defense against the system's rigidity and perceived absurdities. Humans rarely accept these systems passively.
And looking forward, Lyotard predicted, didn't he, that the future power struggles would inevitably center on the control of information itself.
He did. He foresaw that access to and control over information would become the key battleground in postmodern society, which leaves us, he suggested, with a rather stark societal choice. Either move towards totalitarian control exercised through the centralized ownership and manipulation of information databases, or strive for greater justice and emancipation through free public access to information and knowledge, a choice mirrored today perhaps in the ongoing debates around things like net neutrality and the open source software movements like Linux and Firefox, hashtag cyberorganization and actor network theory, ANT.
This deep, almost inescapable entanglement of the human, the machine, and ideology leads us almost inevitably to the concept of the cyborg, and its application to organizations.
Yes, Donna Haraway's concept of the cyborg, that hybrid entity, part human, part machine, is incredibly potent here. She used it to deliberately challenge and deny all those traditional dualisms that have structured Western thought for centuries. Mind versus body, male versus female, natural versus artificial, human versus machine. The cyborg blurs those boundaries.
It's a powerful metaphor for our contemporary reality, where those lines are increasingly blurred by technology.
Absolutely. And building on this, organization theorists like Parker and Cooper coined the specific term cyborganization. They used it to view the modern organization not just as an entity that uses technology, but as one that is perpetually, inextricably bound to its technological infrastructure, particularly its digital infrastructure. The integrated network of communication systems, specialized software, databases, even down to the photocopiers and printers.
So any modern organization reliant on this pervasive infrastructure is functionally a cyborganization.
That's the argument. It's defined by the inescapable complicity that occurs when humans partner with and become dependent upon machines and systems to define organizational stability, instability, performance, and identity. We are co-constituted with our technologies.
Okay. And building on this idea of blurring boundaries, we then get actor network theory, ANT, which is often associated with figures like Bruno Latour. This seems to push the decentering approach even further, doesn't it? It almost denies the traditional privilege given to human agency.
It really does. ANT argues that scientific knowledge, social order, and organization itself are actively constructed and maintained through heterogeneous actor networks. These networks are a constantly shifting mix of, well, everything machines, people, scientific concepts, funding agencies, buildings, microbes, data standards, natural phenomena.
And the core building block here isn't the human actor, but the actant.
Yes, the term actant is borrowed from semiotics. Crucially, it embraces both humans, those who are traditionally seen to act, and non-humans, things which are often seen as merely being acted upon or just inert tools. An actant, in NT terms, is anything that has the capacity to modify the state of affairs or modify the actions of other actants within the network. A speed bump is an actant because it modifies the actant driver. A scientific instrument is an actant because it translates a phenomenon into data that modifies the actant scientist.
So non-humans have agency in this view.
They have the capacity to act to make a difference within the network. And the central philosophical principle of ANT here is relationality. Elements within the network, human or non-human, only achieve their meaning, their identity, and their capabilities in relation to other elements within that specific network. They have no fixed, independent existence or essence outside of these connections.
How does this differ fundamentally from, say, the Scott-Ad approach we discussed earlier?
It's a subtle but important distinction. If Scott were to analyze the adoption of the bicycle, as we discussed, it would likely focus on how different social groups, women, racers, leisure riders, negotiated and shaped the design features of the bike artifact. ANT, however, would look at the entire act of cycling.
The performance itself.
Yes. ANT would say the act of cycling, achieving speed, navigating traffic, experiencing freedom, is performed by the integrated heterogeneous network comprising the human rider, the bicycle itself with its specific components, the road surface, the force of gravity, the traffic regulations, the cycling proficiency license, maybe even the weather. The human is just one crucial actant amongst many within that performing network. The bicycle acts by enabling speed, the road acts by providing friction, the regulations act by constraining movement.
So if Scott tends to see society and technology as interacting but fundamentally separate entities, ANT seems to dissolve that boundary altogether.
Absolutely. Latour himself famously stated that society and technology are not two ontologically distinct entities, but more like phases of the same essential action. The human actor is often critical, yes, particularly in providing the translation or articulation that helps build coherence and enrollment within the network, but they are fundamentally no more or less important in constituting the overall network and its effects than the material infrastructure, the scientific concepts, or the other non-human actants that enable and constrain the action. This radical decentering of the human is a crucial element of the postmodern critique, revealing the often hidden power and influence of non-human actants in shaping our world.
Okay, let's pivot back perhaps slightly towards the structural implications now, starting with Woodward's initial, very powerful idea, the technological imperative. The basic notion that the choice of core technology fundamentally determines the preferred, most effective organizational structure.
Yes, that was the foundational idea of contingency theory in relation to technology. Structure must fit the tech.
But while foundational, this simple imperative was quickly complicated by later research, wasn't it? particularly the work of the Aston Group.
It was. The Aston Group conducted large-scale studies and found that the direct technological imperative that strong link Woodward found seemed to be strongest mainly in small organizations.
Why only small ones?
Because in smaller firms, a larger proportion of employees are typically directly engaged with and impacted by the core technology. As organizations grew larger and much more structurally complex with greater differentiation into specialized departments, more levels of hierarchy, the direct influence of the core manufacturing or service technology on the overall corporate structure became far more diluted, more mediated.
So this means a large multi-division conglomerate, say like General Electric back in the day, which might have one division running a continuous process operation, which Woodward says demands an organic structure, and another division running classic long-linked mass production, demanding a mechanistic structure, couldn't simply be labeled as having one single organic or mechanistic corporate structure dictated by just one of those core technologies.
Exactly. The central corporate structure, the head office functions, they operate under quite different pressures and constraints than the specific production units. The direct link between a specific core technology and the overall structure becomes much weaker, much more complex, and mediated by many other factors in these large, diversified firms, size itself being a major factor, along with market environment, strategy, and so on.
This led Jay Galbraith to propose a crucial refinement, didn't it? He suggested that technology and environment affect structure only indirectly, mediated by communication needs.
Yes, Galbraith's information processing view was a very important development. He argued that factors like technological complexity, environmental uncertainty, and the level of task interdependence, drawing on Thomson, all combine to increase the amount of information that an organization needs to process during task execution. They increase the communication load.
Okay, so it's about the information demand.
Precisely. And it is the organization's adaptive response to this need to process information effectively that directly shapes its social structure.
How does that work?
Well, high complexity in the task or technology leads to structural complexity. You need more specialized departments, more experts, which means more complex structures to coordinate them. High environmental uncertainty promotes the need for more flexible, organic forms of structure because you need richer communication channels to sense and respond to novel information. And high task interdependence, as Thomson showed, increases the demand for more sophisticated communication-intensive coordination mechanisms like teams, liaison roles, and reciprocal communication channels. Structure, in Galbraith's view, is essentially the adaptive mechanism the organization evolves for handling the information processing load generated by its specific technology and environment.
This ongoing effort, then, to bridge the gap between the material aspects of technology, the machine, the software, and the social aspects, the human practice of the communication patterns, leads us towards a more contemporary understanding, captured quite well by theories like adaptive structuration theory, AST, which really focus on technology in use.
Yes. AST, particularly developed by researchers like DeSanctis and Poole, tries to move beyond treating technology and social context as two separate, independent forces that just interact. Instead, it examines their recursive relationship, how they mutually shape each other over time through ongoing use.
And Wanda Orlikowski's research provided some key empirical evidence for this, didn't it? Studying the implementation of Lotus Notes groupware software.
Absolutely. Orlikowski's work was seminal here. She demonstrated very clearly that different individuals and different groups within the same organization used the very same technology, the Notes software, with identical features and capabilities quite differently. Some groups embraced it aggressively, adapting it to build new collaborative routines and changing how they worked. Other groups used it minimally, maybe just for email, essentially reproducing their old ways of working, and perhaps maintained considerable skepticism about its value.
So what does this all mean for structure? It's clearly not just the physical properties of the technology that define the organization or determine the outcome.
No, absolutely not. Structure, according to this perspective, emerges dynamically from both the material properties offered by the technology, its features, constraints, capabilities, and, crucially, the meaning and practices, the habits, the interpretations, the improvisations, the sense-making activities that actors construct around that technology as they use it in their specific social context.
So the technology provides possibilities, but humans choose how to enact them.
In essence, yes. The technology provides a certain set of capabilities and constraints, a structure in a sense, But the specific organizational structures, routines, and outcomes that actually emerge are profoundly shaped by the social context and, importantly, how people adapt, interpret, appropriate, and institutionalize the use of those technological properties over time. Orlikowski's key conclusion really captures this duality. Technology is simultaneously physically constructed by actors, designers, implementers, within a social context, and it is socially constructed by the varied meanings, interpretations, and features that users choose to emphasize, ignore, or adapt in their everyday practices. This technology and use perspective, understanding this recursive interplay, is absolutely essential for understanding how structure really evolves in any modern, digitally integrated organization. #outro, Pitchy.
We have certainly covered some vast territory today, haven't we? Moving all the way from technology understood as an artist's skill, that original idea of techne,
right through to seeing it as part of a complex, decentered network of human and non-human actants.
and finally, arriving at this idea of structure as something that is constantly being shaped and reshaped through the very practice of using technology.
It's quite a journey. So perhaps to synthesize this high-level academic journey we've been on, the modernist focus from people like Woodward, Thompson, and Perot, it provides that indispensable core. It gives us the analytical tools for describing how work actually gets done and how structure needs to align with fundamental task characteristics like complexity and interdependence. You can't ignore that.
It's the foundation.
It's the foundation. Then the symbolic perspective from Wake, the Scott theorists, ethnographers like Orr, adds that crucial layer of interpretation, meaning, and social construction. It reminds us that technology is never just inert matter. It's imbued with meaning through interaction.
And finally,
the postmodern critiques, drawing on thinkers like Heidegger, Lyotard, Haraway, and the ANT scholars, they force us to critically reevaluate the often hidden dynamics of control, power, and our deep, sometimes potentially coercive entanglement with our technologies, that idea of the cyborganization.
Yet it's important to remember, isn't it, that for all the warnings about technologies of control, there's also a powerful liberating potential inherent in technology.
Oh, absolutely. We must acknowledge that. Technology, particularly things like social media, mobile communications, and open source collaboration movements, is also undeniably a profound force for facilitating collective action, dissent, and the pursuit of democracy and social justice globally. Think of its role in various social movements around the world.
So Lyotard's final choice, that stark choice he presented, it really remains the existential challenge of our time, doesn't it? Will the ongoing accelerating computerization of society lead inevitably towards more sophisticated forms of totalitarian control via quantification and surveillance? Or can it lead towards greater justice, transparency, and emancipation through genuinely open access to information and the tools of communication?
That choice, I think, hinges fundamentally on how we consciously choose to manage this evolving relationship between technology and human agency, both individually and collectively. Now, we've seen today how technology profoundly shapes organizational structure, task interdependence, and work processes. And interestingly, our source material provides a brief but relevant historical context for the very definition of culture.
Oh, yes.
It traces the word culture itself back to its roots in the cultivation of crops, which then evolved metaphorically to mean the cultivation of human beings through education and refinement, and eventually settled into the anthropological definition of culture as the complex whole, the way of life of a people, encompassing their beliefs, practices, artifacts attributed to early anthropologists like Tyler and Herskovits.
Okay, so culture as cultivation, evolving into way of life, which raises a rather pivotal final question for our listeners, doesn't it, given everything we've discussed today about technology defining the processes by which organizations transform inputs into outputs?
Indeed. It leads us to this concluding thought. If technology fundamentally defines the process, the how of organizational work, then how does the resulting way of life inside the organization, the established organizational culture that emerges from those processes, how does that culture then feed back to reinforce, perhaps resist, or maybe even redefine the technological systems themselves?
A recursive loop again.
Exactly. If your organizational culture comes to value, say, speed and efficiency above all else, perhaps because the performance metrics embedded in your technology constantly emphasize and reward that, then that culture becomes locked into a self-reinforcing technological loop. It will likely favor future technologies that enhance speed, even if they compromise other values. The culture created by your present use of technology, the habits and values it fosters, almost inevitably shapes the future technologies you choose to embrace or discard.
That recursive entanglement between technology and use and culture seems like the next crucial frontier for organizational study.
It certainly feels that way.
A fascinating thought to leave with you, our listeners. Thank you for diving deep with us today.